Hello. I was just having a look at this photograph, this infamous photograph of Johnson over here, having some sort of business conversation with some of his chums. Now, what's interesting is this fellow over here is Dominic Cummings before he was sacked, before he walked out unceremoniously from 10 Downing Street. And I would love to know from Dominic Cummings whether or not this is something he regards as a party or whether he thought this was business as usual. And Cummings at the moment is being surprisingly silent because, of course, he is now implicated in yet another breaking of COVID. It's another Barnard Castle trip, effectively. So Cummings himself is being smeared with the story. I'm sure Cummings would be only too happy to have this leak if he were not in it. But the question is, where does it come from? The Daily Telegraph today suggests that it might come from the Chancellor, from the Ministry of Finance. That itself is very interesting, given the fact that the Chancellor is one of those people who is poised, potentially, to take over from Boris Johnson, should Johnson be forced to resign. And that is not an inconceivable situation. Johnson is now inheriting the trays of two of the previous sort of lame prime ministers. The first one is John Major. I'll deal with him in a second, but the second one, of course, is the almost indescribable Mrs. May, that icon of incompetence and dithering. Well, Johnson himself has now become an icon of incompetence and dithering. He cannot make up his mind what to do. He's now telling us that we're not going into lockdown yet. This could be Mrs. May speaking, except for the fact that she's not doing so with that very strange wobbly mouth and the extraordinary balls that she hangs around her neck. Mr. Johnson doesn't seem to have any balls, at least not round his neck. So he's become the ditherer, like Mrs. May. And like Mr. Major, he's plunged into a sea of sleaze. But with this difference. Major saw sleaze around him. In fact, he identified the sleaze makers as those shits, excuse the language. And it was only after his premiership that we learnt of Major's dalliance with the Queen, with the egg queen herself, Edwina Currie. Johnson doesn't have this virtue of hindsight. Johnson is way in there, sort of scrabbling around in the sleaze with all his chums, with Matt Hancock, Dominic Raab. Let's snap on some more number 10. Priti Patel. I don't know what I'm doing. Exterminate, exterminate, patronise, patronise, plagiarise. Extraordinary people. And Rishi Sunak. He's not immune from the slur of sleaze. I mean, he's got his swimming pool to explain. What we've got in Johnson is really exactly what we had with Major. We had a fairly secure premiership in Mrs. Thatcher and a fairly secure premiership in the Cameron premiership with Cameron Clegg experience. That would be looked upon now as being something rather positive. And what we've got afterwards is tired government, weariness, staleness. And why does it continue? Because there isn't an opposition of any competence to take over. There isn't an opposition to hold this government to account. There isn't, we can't even look to the media to ask those vital questions, because the media is having its own parties of Christmas present revealed. We only have to talk, we only have to look at the editor of The Sun. Oh, whoops, we had a party on the same date, I think, maybe. Oh, well, let me not admit to that. This is the problem. We don't have anybody who can hold up their hands and say and ask those questions, because nobody is free from the smears of sleaze. We're in a very strange situation. Anyway, look, please do subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. Let's make a bit of Christmas noise. Have fun.